Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we will be discussing the Toronto Raptors game against the Milwaukee Bucks. But before we do that, I want to talk more draft, more NBA draft. And you might be sensing a pattern here. When the Raptors win a game, I talk about the Toronto Raptors. And when the Raptors lose, and particularly when they lose, pretty ugly game, I like to talk about the draft. Because I think that that's kind of what you guys want to see. You want to hear me talk about what the Toronto Raptors could get at the end of the season, and that's what we're going to do today. And in fact, I have a pretty exciting one for you. This whole draft is very exciting. There's a lot of really intriguing prospects that will be available at the top of the draft. And the guy that I'm going to be talking about today is pretty much the consensus number 4 pick on the big board, VJ Edgecombe. And he is a Bahamian player. He is from the Bahamas. He emigrated to the United States in the 9th grade, and he was an All-American. VJ Edgecombe is a super athletic guard. He is 19 years old, 6'5", but we're talking about a guy who has some ups that compare with the elite athletes in the NBA today, which makes him a very exciting prospect. But there's other things about him that are pretty interesting as well, and we'll get into that. But it's worth noting that all of the players at the top of this year's draft are all kind of freaks one way or another. They're all really good athletes with great size for position. They all have, really big pluses going for them beyond their skills as a basketball player. And VJ Edgecombe is another one of those players. So if you've ever watched any of his highlights, if you've ever watched a Baylor game, one of the things that just leaps off of the page at you are his leaping ability and his explosiveness off the dribble, and speed with the ball in his hands. We're talking about a guy who has really, really great fast twitch muscle movement, extremely powerful springs that let him finish plays that other guards just simply cannot. This guy has something that you can't teach. He is a super athlete. We're talking about somewhere in the realm, maybe not as good as, but we're talking about in the same ballpark as other super athletic guards like Russell Westbrook, Ja Morant, Derrick Rose, those kinds of players who have the really springy legs that can create some of the most iconic and Sports Center worthy highlight moments. And that is obviously aesthetically a very pleasing thing to have on your team, but you have to have a little bit more than that if you want to be one of the top players in a good draft class, which this one is. And thankfully he does have a couple of tools. The first of which is the fact that he is a very good defender. At the guard position, it's kind of interesting to note where he will settle long-term, whether he is a guy who you feel comfortable handling the ball and being one of your number 1 options. I think he has some of that potential as well. He'll have to make some strides offensively. But in terms of what he brings on the defensive end, that is one of his most intriguing things that he has going for him as a prospect. So just looking at his statistics, they're pretty eye-popping. So he is averaging about 2.5 steals per game in under 30 minutes, which is phenomenal. And he's averaging about a block a game as well. Of course, he's being helped quite a bit by his explosiveness, but he's also very good at reading plays. I'm not exactly sure what his measurements are at this point because the draft combine hasn't happened yet, but his wingspan, at least when I'm watching the game, looks impressive. And wingspan is one of the best tools that you can have as a defender because it allows you to kind of reach in and grab the ball, poke the ball loose, as well as challenging shots. A lot of players will try and shoot over you, but if you have long enough arms, you can really challenge the shot or even block it, as he's been able to do a lot this season. One of the very interesting things about him as a prospect is the defensive processing. So I talk a lot about processing when evaluating prospects. Processing is, you might have heard like basketball IQ. Processing is the new term for that kind of thing, where you're able to understand what's going on in the court. Offensively, that's generally where people talk about processing, because a lot of these top prospects are guys you're going to be putting the ball into the hands of, and they're going to have to make the correct decision more often than not. But there is basketball processing on the defensive side as well. And when you watch VJ, he does have a high level of that. He is looking to help. And that's one of the most important things that you can have on the defensive side of the ball is tracking how the play is going to develop, what the other team is trying to do, and then he can use his elite physical tools to come in and disrupt those plays. And I mentioned that is one of the strengths of Cooper Flagg, the consensus #1 prospect in this year's draft. He has that mentality where he's trying to fix problems on the defensive end. And you can see that with VJ as well. He can use his explosiveness and his good wingspan to disrupt shots and dig in. A lot of players are very surprised by his athleticism, and he can explode to a spot where the offensive player would not expect him to be able to get to. He has a lot of really amazing highlight reel blocks where he's able to explode and block a shot that the shooter assumed he would just not be able to get to. And he's just a superior athlete in that respect. So he's very good at that, and combined with his understanding of the defensive end, he looks like he will be an impact defender at the next level. And if you have one of those players at the guard spot, you can start to think about having an elite defense, because usually the guard spot is where you have to make some concessions. Generally, guards are not as good defensively, and you need to have other players patch over those holes. He does not seem like that type of player at the next level. Looks like he will be able to make a big impact on the defensive end. One of his other strengths is his drive and kick ability. He is very good, obviously, at getting into the lane with his explosiveness, and he's able to turn that into assists and open shots for his teammates. He also has a pretty good understanding of how plays are going to develop, so I think processing is a plus for him on both ends of the court. So those are some pretty intriguing strengths. You take an elite athlete with really good wingspan and explosiveness, and you combine it with a nascent understanding of how the game works and thinking a few steps ahead, you're already talking about a very intriguing prospect. And that's kind of where we are right now with VJ. That's why scouts are looking at him and thinking that this guy is going to make a leap to the next level. Because a good thing about him is that he is a freshman. He's 19 years old, so not the youngest player in the draft, but still a freshman, still a young player. And when you project going forward, you are going to assume that this player is going to make strides in different areas. And he does have some weaknesses to his game, but right now the strengths, the things that you can't teach, explosiveness, good processing, those are all there, make him an intriguing prospect moving forward, but he does have some room for growth. And right now he does have some pretty significant weaknesses. So right now VJ is shooting 41% from the field and around 32% from three. The three-point percentage is actually pretty decent for a player who is obviously still learning and still growing as an offensive player. That's not in, the super concern zone. He's taking about 4.5 threes per game, which is decent volume, and 32% is, not very good, but not horrendous. So one thing that you might have noticed if you've been watching Baylor this season is that VJ plays off of the ball the majority of the game. The Baylor Bears don't really utilize him as an offensive player to what I would consider his maximum potential. He is generally playing off of the ball and really doesn't get a ton of touches. He is more used as a decoy, and if their initial pick and roll doesn't work, sometimes they'll give him the ball and allow him to create. But generally, he's not the first option on the floor, or even really the second. So that's one of the reasons that we're not seeing a ton of points from him. And there's a reason for him playing off the ball most of the time, and that is because his handle needs work. Right now, he is mostly a straight line driver, and he can drive with his left hand a little bit, although he prefers to go right. And generally, if he can beat his man off of the dribble and has a highway to the rim, he can finish with some pretty amazing dunks and acrobatic finishes. However, at the moment, he really needs to tighten up his handle, because right now he can drive into the lane, and if help defense comes over, right now he is good at finding open teammates when he draws the double. And another is that he tends to settle for a pull-up jump shot, which is not very accurate right now, and in fact is probably one of the biggest reasons why he is not a very efficient player from two-point range. Because when you see a guy with the springs that VJ has, you might wonder, well, why is his two-point percentage so low? And that's really what it is that he can't reliably get into the paint with his handle and get to a point where he can finish above the rim and utilize that athleticism. So he's lacking somewhat of an in-between game. Another compounding factor here is that for a player who is as explosive as VJ is, His free throw attempt rate is pretty low. Generally, guards who are very explosive tend to draw a lot of fouls. But generally, I think really it's all about his usage right now, is that it is much lower than many of the other prospects at the top of this draft. He is not really being given the ball very much. It's hopeful that towards the end of the season, Baylor will feel a little bit more comfortable putting the ball in his hands so we can see him be a primary creator a little bit more at the college level. Because I think that scouts really kind of see that as one of the main draws to him, is that he has all of these intangibles and these really intriguing skills and a good processing. You would hope that he would be able to tighten that handle up so that once he gets to the next level and grows as a player, then he becomes that all-around star guard. And I think he has the potential to get there, although there are some concerns. The biggest of which at the moment, I would say, is his ability to create off of the dribble and his shooting stroke, especially in the mid-range. He has not been very effective. So I do like VJ as a prospect. I think that one thing that will certainly translate is his defense. He is an excellent defender, both in terms of getting on loose balls, creating deflections. His man defense is also very good. He can move his feet, stay in front of guys, and then create a good challenge. He will be an impact defender at the next level. So that raises his floor. But at pick number 4, you are definitely wanting to see more consistency on the offensive end. And I hope that as the season goes on, we're able to see him more in a number 1 role where he is not playing so much off of the ball and is able to create a little bit. I'd like to be able to see him use more screens. There is still some growth that needs to happen with VJ. But he is an intriguing prospect, and I think at number 4, he is kind of the consensus guy that most scouts have at the number 4 position. And I kind of agree with them. I'm looking at what he brings to the table, and I think that the upside is really just very difficult to pass up at this stage. So that's VJ Edgecombe. We will be moving on now to the game against the Milwaukee Bucks. Why don't we get right into the player evaluations? And this one wasn't that difficult to pick. RJ Barrett had a very good night. He was one of the only consistent scorers for the Toronto Raptors, at least in the starting lineup. He finished with 21 points on 16 shots. He was 3 of 7 from 3, which is quite good. 4 of 6 from the line. 4 rebounds, 10 assists. His playmaking is still, a huge reason why I'm high on this guy. 1 steal, 0 blocks, 2 turnovers. He was really the engine that was driving the Toronto Raptors and making the game competitive, especially into the second half, where they made a bit of a game of it. They made a run in the fourth quarter to bring it within 10. Unfortunately, the wheels fell off after that, but I thought he had a very, very good night on the offensive end. And his playmaking is still one of the things that is the most surprising about him, especially since he's come to the Raptors. His ability to run the pick and roll, his ability to find cutters, his ability to get into the paint and drive and kick. The Toronto Raptors really struggled to shoot last night, and he was one of the only guys that could actually knock down a 3, and probably one of the Toronto Raptors' best options right now as a play in the half court is giving the ball to RJ Barrett and letting him run a screen and roll. He uses screens from Poeltl very well. Scotty, was complaining about this earlier in the season, where I thought that he should be used as a screener a little bit more, especially with RJ Barrett, because those two are 2 of the best offensive players on the team. I think that they could have some synergy there. He is using Scotty Barnes screens very well as well. And I think that he just did a very good job yesterday of using the pick and roll to create in the half court for the Toronto Raptors. It was the most consistent option that they had. Then when he's playing off ball, his 3-point shot was on. Catch and shoot 3-point shots for RJ Barrett are a good shot for the Toronto Raptors offense when he's open and when he's able to catch and shoot. So really just not a lot to complain about. Last night, I think he had a really good game. Next up, we'll go to Davon Mitchell. Davon Mitchell has been great the past couple of games. In Boston, he was great. In this game, he was great. He had 10 points on 4 of 6 shooting. He hit a 3. He had 3 assists, a block, and 2 turnovers. He was given the very difficult task of guarding Damian Lillard, and Damian Lillard is one of the best offensive players in the league. And while Damian Lillard had a very good game, a lot of that was because of the fouls. So he shot 10 free throws. And I'm just going to say right now that a lot of those free throws, weak sauce. And Davon Mitchell is was doing his best. Damian Lillard had a good night, but it's not just the man-to-man defense that makes Davion a good defender. He's good at playing the passing lanes. He's good at Xing out. He's good on switches. He plays bigger than his height. And then on offense, he had a couple of really nice drives to the rim. He got an and one. He hit a three. I think it was a good night from him in an evening where it was, RJ Barrett had probably the standout performance in the starting lineup. And then after that, it really kind of tailed off. After that, we'll go to Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl had 12 points on 11 shots. He missed some gimmies. He got blocked by Brook Lopez. He had 2 assists, a steal, and a block, and 2 turnovers. He did block Giannis Antetokounmpo under the rim, so that was nice. But I feel like the Raptors just kind of got outworked on the inside and outsized by the Bucks. He looked like he was struggling to score against Brook Lopez, especially when it came to trying to score like with a layup. I think the push shot is still a great shot for him, and he can get it off, and Brook had a hard time recovering to that. But every time he tried to go inside and make a layup around there, Brook was there, and he got blocked pretty badly by Brook. But not a great night from him. I think that the defense could have been better. And maybe Scotty should have been ahead of him just because his defense was better than Poeltl's. But we'll go to Scotty now. I think that Scotty had probably one of his worst games of the season. He had 10 points on 16 shots. Not good. 0 of 6 from 3. You could tell that Scotty didn't want to get into the paint, especially when he was handling the ball. They have 2 of the best rim protectors in the league in Giannis Antetokounmpo and Brook Lopez, and they play them at the same time. They've got some good help defenders as well. They've got some players that are annoying to drive against. He did have a couple of mid-range shots that went in, and then when he was playing off the ball, he was able to score a little bit more, but generally just not a good night from him. He did have 8 rebounds. He did have 10 assists, which was nice. 2 steals, 2 blocks, 3 turnovers. So the other stuff, the non-on-ball stuff, was good. I think that he did an okay job of guarding Giannis. Giannis was kind of unstoppable, and he shot 18 free throws. But again, a lot of them were just kind of, touch fouls and ticky-tack. A lot of them, like the Bucks did not need that much help from the referees, and it seemed like they were getting a lot of it. And when they didn't call a foul, I think Scotty Barnes was playing pretty good defense on Giannis. And he also switched down a little bit as well, covering Damian Lillard on the perimeter at certain points, forcing him off of the line to drive inside. But when you're just really struggling from the field, and I think the process, again, one of those bad process nights for Scotty Barnes, which has admittedly become much more of a rare thing. He is not jacking up threes. Last night was not a good process night. It's also about volume too. It's not just the quality of the shots. Like 6 3-point shots when you haven't hit a 3, you got to try something different. Last off, we've got Brady Dick. 13 points on 12 shots, 0 of 5 from 3. He did draw a couple fouls. He was 3 of 3 from the free throw line, 1 rebound, 3 assists, 1 steal, 0 blocks, 0 turnovers. So we'll start with the good stuff first. Brady Dick did a good job of driving into the lane past Damian Lillard. So Damian Lillard is tasked with guarding generally the worst offensive player on the floor, the guy who is the least capable of burning him. A lot of the time you would think Davon Mitchell, but Davon Mitchell's actually pretty explosive off of the dribble, and he can get to the rack. And Grady did a pretty good job of taking Damian off of the dribble a couple of times. He got an and one off of him. He had a couple of baseline jumpers, a couple shots inside the arc. He had a nice scoop shot. The problem is that like Grady Dick, his whole game is kind of predicated on the fact that he's a good 3-point shooter. And while it's nice to have certain things around the edges where he is able to contribute in other areas, he has to be able to shoot the ball. I know it's still early in his career, and he did have a good start to the season. The sample size is growing. Right now, this season, he's under 35% from 3. Last season, he was about 36% from 3, which is fine for a player who is a 3-and-D player, or a scorer, a guy who has a skill set where other things are more important than just the shooting. But if you're looking at him as a guy who is primarily a shooter, that's not good enough. He needs to be a better shooter in order to justify him being on the floor. And he's still young and he can still get better, but I need to see him contribute more. He's really cooled off from 3. I need to see him shoot the ball better so that I can feel better about him as a prospect. And that's the starting lineup. We'll go to the bench. So this is crow eating time, because the 2 guys that I've been harping on for weeks now had great games last night. Kelly Olynyk, we'll start with him because I think he had just a fantastic game. 15 points on 7 shots, 2 of 4 from 3. He only went 3 of 6 from the line, but he did draw a couple of fouls, and he was kind of the vocal guy, one of the vets who was really getting on the refs for just being so one-sided. He told the ref, "You can't see crap," maybe with more colorful language. And he was rewarded with some free throws. He had 4 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and a turnover. And I think, kind of held it down on defense a little bit as well. It wasn't that horrible on his part. So maybe the injury thing really is the key here. The rust, shaking off the rust. Kelly definitely looked a lot better last night. And being able to hit threes is a huge development. And he's still, I think, a trade candidate, but having more of these types of games will make him more attractive for other teams. So, hopefully he can keep it up. I thought he had a good game. Next up, Bruce Brown had probably his best game of the season. So he did a lot of really good stuff. He finished with 17 points on 6 of 11 shooting. He was 2 of 5 from 3, so he's one of the only guys who could hit a 3-point shot last night. 3 of 4 from the line, 6 rebounds, so he's continuing to provide the rebounding off of the bench, which is nice to see. 0 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks, 1 turnover. And I think that he was doing a good job playing off of the ball. And one of his biggest strengths as a player is being able to cut to the basket, making himself available for passes. And the Raptors generally just kept finding him in a position to score. And he was exploiting the Bucks' help defense. A lot of the time they would bring 2 to the ball and he would slip to the rim and they could find him and he'd make the layup. So he did a good job. I'm really encouraged seeing him being able to contribute that way. And his defense was solid too, so I think he had a good game. Chris Boucher had a solid night, 6 points on 3 of 4 shooting, 6 rebounds, but he's cooled off a little bit. He was 0 of 1 from 3, and it looked like he was kind of deferring. I saw him pass up some shots, which is barely ever see that. He was, I think, taking a back seat to the other 2 guys off of the bench, Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown, because they had it going, which is fine. I'm totally okay with what I saw from Chris Boucher last night. And there were a couple other people who played, but that's pretty much the game. Hard game to watch. Really, I complained about the refs, but yeah, the Bucks shot 41 free throws, and the Raptors shot 24. 17 free throw discrepancy there. Just, I get it. The Raptors foul a lot. They commit the most fouls in the NBA. I wonder how much of that is just they're young and they haven't established themselves yet. They can't get away with some of the stuff that other teams get away with. But this was just uneven. That's really what I hate. A lot of the time you can watch a game and the refs let you know what they're going to do. They don't call certain fouls. They let players play tough under the basket, or maybe they let guys hand check a little bit. It seemed like the refs were simply letting the Bucks do what they want and then penalizing the Raptors for doing the exact same thing. And I hate that. Giannis Antetokounmpo is a fantastic player. Damian Lillard, one of the best scorers, of our generation. And then they have the role players. The Bucks are a good team, and I wrote them off way too soon because they had the dysfunction. And you see Doc Rivers, and you're like, okay, well, this could go sideways really quick. But they've seemed to have solved all of those things, and they've beaten the Raptors, just beaten the crap out of the Raptors in every game. They swept the season series, wasn't even close. That's how it goes. But the Raptors, as I mentioned before, I predicted it, they're back on the tank track. So next up, the Toronto Raptors play the Orlando Magic. They've started to get healthy. Paolo Banchero is back. He's played 4 games since returning. So that'll be a difficult one. Obviously, the Magic really struggle on offense, but they were able to show that it doesn't really matter if you have a bunch of players buying into the system and a lot of defensive playmaking, which they definitely have in spades. So that'll be a tough game to win. It's a little bit of a break. That'll be on Tuesday. But yeah, the Toronto Raptors season marches on, and that is the video. What do you think about VJ Edgecombe? Is he a good fit for the Toronto Raptors? Does it even matter? Should they be drafting for fit? Do you think he's going to figure it out on offense? Let me know here in the comments section, and also on X and on Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I love talking to Raptors fans. I'm very happy to answer your questions and comments. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell icon. All of those good things helps the channel get noticed. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.